What's going on, and welcome back to another money saving gear hack and tips and tricks of the trade video. And in this video we're going to be going over a couple of modifications that you can make to your traditional metal M4 or AR15 magazines. Now, when it comes to those modifications that you can make to the magazines, depending on the followers that you have, you can replace the follower as well as add grip or tread tape to the base of the magazine to give you a little bit more texture to grab onto the magazine for reloads and preventing your hand from slipping or sliding off of the magazine, as well as these 550 core to mag pull loops. All of these modifications are pretty cheap when it comes down to it. The Gorilla tape that I'm using, or the Gorilla tread tape, is about $14 a roll. 550 cord is pretty cheap, $5 to $10 for varying lengths of 550 cord, and then the metal magazines themselves are relatively inexpensive compared to some of the other mags that are out there. Some of them are more expensive, but it's just kind of a case-by-case basis, buying used or new, and then the manufacturer themselves. So before I get into the modifications of the magazines themselves and the things that you can add, I want to talk about some of the magazine followers that you're going to see out on the market that are still in circulation. Some of them are being used in the military, some of them are not. So just something to be aware of if you're buying metal mags. So when it comes to the different magazine followers that you can find in your AR metal magazines are the green and the black followers, like this one right here, and then you have typically a Brownells magazine with a tan follower, and then you have the new tan magazine with a blue follower, which is kind of specific for the military and the new EPR round that they're using. With that, when it comes to these magazines and how these followers work, the tan and the blue magazine follower are going to have a leveling shelf or ledge that's going to come off the front of the magazine, which is going to prevent that follower from catching on the front end or front wall of the magazine. The green and the black magazine followers do not have that leading edge on the magazine. So as you feed rounds into the magazine and that magazine follower is coming up, you run the risk of potentially having the magazine follower get caught inside of the magazine on that leading or front wall of the magazine, preventing those rounds from being properly fed into the gun. This can be a catastrophic thing when it happens. I have had this happen in combat in Afghanistan, and it is not a good day. It's very frustrating when it happens. It was quite a while ago. I mean, it's probably 10 years at this point now, but it has happened. I know a ton of dudes that have had this happen to them, and it's a frustrating situation when you have it happen, because you're trying to get that gun back up into the fight, and if you don't have a secondary firearm, it can be a really bad day. So I would recommend, if you have these green followers, replace them with one of the Magpul leveling magazine followers. They usually are yellow or a green color. There are a couple of other companies that make them, and it's about $3 to $5 for about a pack of 3. So something I would definitely replace inside of these magazines if you have these magazines with the green or the black follower. But like I said, with some of the newer magazines like this Brownells and the newer EPR magazines, they have that leading ledge on the front of the magazine. So it's just as simple as you put the rounds in, and then as they come up, they don't get caught and stuck inside of the magazine. It can still happen, unfortunately, no matter what mag you're using, Magpul, in any one of the other companies that are out there, you can have rounds actually get caught on the front edge or front wall of the magazine and stop those rounds from feeding. So just something to be cognizant of. It isn't something you can always prevent, but having these leveled followers can help prevent that from happening. So those are the different types of magazines that are out there. There also are the straight 20 round magazines that are out there. They're both metal and polymer. I don't think Magpul makes them anymore, but I know there are a lot of 20 round magazines, metal 20 round magazines, that are highly sought after in the industry. And those have a silver follower. They're not as prone to canting as the green or the black followers in the 30 round magazines, but they can still do it. So something just to be cognizant of, and I'll just leave it at that. So with that, real quick, when it comes to replacing your magazine followers, if you find yourself in the position where you have those green followers in your magazine, it's just as simple as taking a cleaning rod, simply inserting it into that circular cutout in the bottom of the magazine, and then kind of pulling back against it, or against that floor plate of the magazine, to where you get these two little ledges to move off of the back side of the magazine. You're going to retain your spring, pull that out all the way, and then this will just slide out like so. So like I was saying, when it comes to these magazine followers, if they have that leveling ledge or front plate, they'll have that on there. If they don't, this will be cut, you know, roughly in this area right there. So that's what's causing that magazine follower to cant and get locked up inside of the magazine. So it's as simple as you just pull this side out of the magazine plate, it comes apart, and then putting it back together is pretty simple. Even if you're using the modified ones, you'll just pull that little hook end out to take it out, and then you're just kind of pulling it out as well to put it back in there, and that's as simple as that. From there, just take that magazine, make sure you line up all of your little grooves and everything like so, and then you'll just push that spring back into place, and then take your floor plate and then add that and slide it back onto the magazine. And it's as simple as that. Nothing crazy to it. Simple cleaning rod will do it. There's some other tools and things that you can get out there. I know there's specific kind of floor plates that I've seen, or floor plate removers that companies have made for AR15 mags and Glock mags. To each their own, whatever makes it easier for you. So with that, that's really all it takes for replacing that magazine follower in there. So when it comes to putting these guys together, I'm going to recommend that you start with the Magpul loop first, just because if you start with the grip tape first, you're going to run into, you know, a situation or scenario where you're trying to get this plate off, depending on how close you get to the base of the magazine, to where this can be a little bit of a challenge to get that magazine plate back onto the magazine itself. So when it comes to the different types of 550 cord Magpul loops you can create, you have a couple of different options. You can keep it super simple with about 7 inches of 550 cord, tie an overhand knot on either end of that piece of 550 cord, and that will give you just a simple loop that will sit at the base of the magazine. Kind of your next step from there is roughly 11 inches of 550 cord, an overhand knot on either end, and then you tie an overhand knot at the top of the loop to give you something or a little bit more to grab onto, because over time what you're going to find is these guys are just going to fold over, get worn in, and they're not going to have that structural integrity that I was kind of talking about earlier. Then you have kind of the next step up from there is just a simple 550 cord loop with about 10 inches of 550 cord and an overhand knot at the base. The nice thing with this is more unlikely, or it's unlikely that this is going to untie inside of the magazine, where this, I have seen these untie inside of the magazine where one of these knots, you know, comes undone and then the left or the right side of the loop pulls out of the magazine. So something to be cognizant of for just the simplest version. It might be better to go with, you know, that extra 3 inches and give yourself a little bit larger loop, and then you run this around the spring at the base of the magazine, so that way it prevents that from being untied and coming undone. And then last but not least, you have a little bit more complex version where you have an overhand knot at the base of it and then an overhand knot at the top of it. You're going to need roughly around 14 to 15 inches for this, just because of the amount of, you know, 550 cord that's used in each one of those knots. Now, I have seen a couple of variations of Magpul loops that guys have created for the base of their magazines, and they're elaborate, they're cool because they're braided 550 cord and so on, but you know, the concern that I have with that is you have 550 cord just kind of dangling and flopping around on the front of your kit. So I would keep it simple so that way you don't have the snag hazard of those larger, you know, more elaborate 550 cord kind of braided systems that are out there. So keep it simple, just stick with this. And then last but not least, when it comes to, you know, the unbraided versus the braided version, I shouldn't say unbraided, the gutted versus the ungutted. With the gutted version, over time, and it's going to happen a lot faster, the 550 cord is going to lay flat on top of the base of the magazine, which is going to make it a little bit difficult to get that 550 cord. Sometimes, and I have seen it happen, where the 550 cord with heat will start to stick to the base of the magazine, causing, you know, some issues trying to get that magazine out of the pouch. Where with the ungutted version of the 550 cord, it's going to have a little bit more structural integrity for a longer amount of time, and then it's going to be easier to, you know, grab onto this and pull it up, even when it's kind of broken in and is starting to fold over, and then that's where that knot comes into play, you know, as time progresses. So with that, when it comes to actually setting these up inside of the magazine, like I showed you before, you're just going to lift that floor plate just a little bit, and then you're just going to control that base plate back roughly around halfway, and that way you can, you know, add these different types of loops. For your simplest versions, like these two, you're just going to take that 550 cord knot on either end and run that on either side of the spring, like so. And then from there, you'll just kind of push the plate to the left and to the right over the 550 cord, and then you'll pull that 550 cord back and push that plate in place, and then that will give you your little loop at the top right there, or at the base of the magazine. Now, when it comes to the looped versions, where you have that whole kind of closed loop like these two, what you're going to end up doing is you're going to take the knotted end, you're going to insert it and then pull the right side of the 550 cord around the right side of the spring, and the left side of the 550 cord around the left side of the spring. And then from there, you're just going to do the same thing, shift the plate to the left and to the right, get it over that 550 cord, and then just push that plate back into place like so. So this one is a little bit longer than 10 inches, but 10 inches is going to give you a shorter loop, which is going to be roughly around like this length. So that way you don't have all this excess on the top right here. With that, last but not least, when it comes to setting up your magazines, do not run your 550 cord loop from top to bottom. Run it from left to right, because what I've seen with guys that have run the 550 cord mag pull loops from top to bottom is the 550 cord loop will actually pull up against the back of your floor plate, and it will pull it up enough to where the little latches that are on the inside of that floor plate that hold that floor plate in place will come out, and then you'll have this entire floor plate just fall off on its own, and then you have to rebend it, try and get it back into position so that way it stays in place, because the last thing you really want is you really don't want your floor plate to fall off and then all of your rounds come ejecting out the bottom of the magazine because you don't have a secure floor plate. And I have seen that happen in combat. Not a good day for that, dude. So take care of your floor plates. They're a critical piece to the magazine when it comes to setting up your magazine mag pull loops. So when it comes to setting up the grip tape or tread tape on the base of the magazine, there's a couple of ways you can do it. You can do it the fast and expedient way and just take your magazine and wrap it around and call it good, or you can take it a step further and you can take that tape, wrap it all the way around, and then cut inside of the grooves, allowing you to push that tape down into the groove, preventing, you know, those open spots from having dirt and debris collect in them and then causing that tape to rip off. It's as simple as just taking, you know, a knife or a multi-tool or scissors, cutting down the middle, and then taking your cleaning rod and then just pushing that material down in there. So that is another way that you can do it. I wouldn't say it's necessarily my preferred way, because you can have these independent little sections, what they'll end up being, come off of the actual magazine, but it is a way to kind of keep and prevent that dirt and debris from getting in there. Or there's a last and the most methodical way of doing it, where you progressively wrap the tape around the entire base of the magazine, and then you're pushing the material down into, or the tape down into the grooves, so that way you don't have any openings or slots. I don't know if you can see that inside of the magazine when it's all put together. So I'm going to show you how to do this, so that because at the end of the day the other versions are pretty simple and straightforward. So pretty simple. You're going to take your 7-inch piece of tread tape, and you're going to start it on one of the large flats just above the base of the magazine. Press that into place, and then you're always going to try and control this end of the tape so that way it's not grabbing onto the magazine on the other side. And then you're just going to take the threaded portion of your cleaning rod, and you're just going to push that material or that tape down into that groove, causing that adhesive to, you know, grab onto the groove of the magazine and then hold it in place. And then from there, you're just going to gently fold it over, Repress it if you need to, just to make sure that everything is in place. Press that around the magazine and then wrap it around, and then you're always essentially progressively applying the tape in little increments, so that way you can get as much adhesive contact on that magazine. And again, just taking that cleaning rod and pressing that tape and that adhesive down into the groove, and then running it over that flat, and then your smaller groove. And then again your next flat, and smaller groove. And then once you get to this back side, you're going to see that this is probably going to end up covering up the magazine floor plate. Not a big deal. You can still get these magazine floor plates off, and then as you push it back on, it's going to end up kind of just eating away at the base of the tape right there, just kind of separating the tape. So it doesn't really cause any issues, but just realize, if you set yourself up to where you're a little bit above that, when you set up the tape initially, you're going to prevent that from getting caught up, but it really doesn't make a big difference. But it can be a little bit frustrating when you're trying to get that floor plate back on the magazine. On the back side, same thing. You're going to have those grooves on the back side of the magazine. You're just going to press those into place, run it over that flat, and then again reapply that. Now with these grip tape, or with the grip tape option or the tread tape, I wouldn't drag your cleaning rod across this because you can mess up the threads, where just pressing it in there is gonna preserve those threads just a little bit. And then last but not least, you have that next little groove, and then the flat, and then your last groove. Pretty easy to feel if you're in the groove or not. And then you're just sealing it back to the other side of the piece of grip tape. And just make sure that when you're on the other side of the grip tape, you press that down in there, get that adhesive to adhere to the other, or to the sandpaper side or the grip side of the tape, so that way it's secure and in place, and then it looks nice and clean, versus this version where when you're making those cuts, you kind of have excess material, and it just doesn't look as clean. So taking the time to make sure that all that is set up and good to go is key and critical to setting all that up to where it works for you. So with that, there really isn't a whole lot else to it. If you need to use a multi-tool to be able to pull those floor plates off, that definitely helps. It can also help with helping remove the spring from the magazine follower. Scissors, obviously, to be able to cut your tape, and then a lighter for the 550 cord. So with that, there really isn't much else to it. It definitely is kind of a simple modification that you can make to all of your magazines that doesn't cost a lot of money, or cost you a lot of money in purchasing your own magazines, and where you're setting everything up to where you have good magazine followers, replacing these green or black magazine followers, grip tape to help with magazine reloads and give you some texture to grab onto so your hand isn't sliding off the magazine, and then the magazine loop or mag pull loop for when you have kit that's really tight around the magazines and you need something to help you get that magazine out of the pouch. So different things that you can do to help set up your magazines to set you up for success and make your kit work a little bit better for you when it comes down to it. So with that, if you have any questions, please feel free. Ask whatever questions you have. We'll help you out in any way that we can. Like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.